My name's Josh, I'm 34, and I've been married to my wife, Rachel, who's 32, for 6 years. We met through mutual friends at a party, and honestly, things moved fast. She was funny, beautiful, and had this sharp wit that could cut through a room like a knife. I thought I hit the jackpot. We don't have kids, just our golden retriever, Max, who's like a child to me. I work in construction management, so my hours are long, but I've always made time for Rachel. She, on the other hand, works part-time as a yoga instructor, which means she's home a lot more than I am. Or at least she used to be. Lately, things had been off. It started small. Rachel would get defensive any time I asked about her day. "Why are you so nosy?" she'd snap, like I was accusing her of something. Then there were the excuses. She'd disappear for hours under the pretense of running errands. But when I'd ask what she was up to, her stories didn't add up. And then there was the food delivery thing. She'd always liked ordering out, but over the past couple of months, it became an almost daily ritual. I'd come home to find takeout containers everywhere, and she'd mention that sweet delivery guy, like he was some local hero. I didn't think much of it at first, it sounded harmless. But then I noticed the way she lit up whenever she talked about him. "Oh, Kyle always remembers my extra sauce," she'd gush, like it was some groundbreaking act of chivalry. A few times, I even caught her putting on makeup before she expected a delivery. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my gut told me something wasn't right. I just didn't know how bad it really was. I'd been ignoring the red flags for weeks, convincing myself that I was just paranoid. Rachel had always been a little extra, and maybe I was reading too much into it. But everything changed one Friday night. I came home earlier than usual because my site had to shut down due to equipment issues. Normally, Rachel would greet me, or at least acknowledge I was there. But that night, the house was eerily quiet. Max came trotting up to me, wagging his tail, but Rachel was nowhere in sight. Her car was in the driveway, and a quick check confirmed her phone was on the kitchen counter. So I figured she had to be home. That's when I noticed the back door was unlocked. I stepped outside, and that's when I heard it. Rachel's unmistakable laugh. But it wasn't the kind of laugh she gave me anymore. It was the flirty, almost giggly kind she used to do when we first started dating. The sound was coming from the garage. My stomach dropped. I quietly made my way over, and through the cracked garage door, I saw them. Rachel and the food delivery guy, Kyle, apparently. He looked about 25 with one of those patchy beards that can't quite commit. He was sitting on my tool bench while Rachel leaned against him, her hand resting on his knee. I couldn't hear every word, but the tone was enough. She said something about how much fun this has been, and how much she looks forward to seeing him. He grinned like an idiot and leaned in closer. That's when I saw her kiss him. I froze. My mind went blank and my body went numb. I felt like I was watching a movie, like this couldn't possibly be my life. My wife was making out with a guy who delivered chicken sandwiches for a living. I stepped back, trying not to make a sound. My first instinct was to kick the door open and knock Kyle off my damn tool bench, but something stopped me. Instead, I walked back into the house, sat down at the kitchen table, and waited. Rachel came in about 15 minutes later, looking flushed but trying to act normal. "Hey, babe," she said casually, grabbing her phone off the counter. "What are you doing home so early?" I stared at her, my fists clenched under the table. "Just had a short day. What were you up to?" Her eyes darted away for a second before she plastered on that fake smile of hers. "Oh, just tidying up and playing with Max." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her I'd seen everything. But I decided to wait. I needed more than a confrontation. I needed a plan. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel and Kyle in the garage, her hand on his knee, the kiss. It replayed in my mind like a broken record. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to confront her empty-handed. I needed her to admit it. The next day, I told her I'd be working late, even though I planned to leave the site early. I parked my truck down the block and walked back to the house, sneaking into the backyard like some wannabe detective. Sure enough, around 4:30, Kyle's car pulled up. I hid behind the shed, watching him walk up to the door with that same delivery bag. Except this time, Rachel didn't just take the food and say thanks. She pulled him inside, and I waited another 30 minutes before finally walking in through the front door. When she heard the door slam, Rachel practically flew out of the living room, her face pale. "Josh, you're home early again," she said, her voice tight. Kyle was standing awkwardly in the doorway, holding his bag like he was trying to decide if he should bolt or not. "What's going on, Rachel?" I asked, staring straight at her. "Why is he here?" She stammered, her eyes darting between me and Kyle. "Oh, Kyle was just dropping off food. I forgot to tip him last time, so we were just catching up." "Catching up," I repeated, my voice calm but icy. I turned to Kyle. "You always stay for a chat with your customers, Kyle? Or is this some special service you offer?" Kyle looked like a deer caught in headlights. Rachel jumped in, her voice rising. "Don't you dare interrogate him, Josh. You're being ridiculous. This is exactly why I don't tell you things. You always overreact." I laughed bitterly. "Overreact?" I walked into my house, and there's a guy in my living room with a delivery bag. What am I supposed to think? "Rachel." She crossed her arms, defiant as ever. "You're supposed to trust me, Josh. Nothing is going on. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Then why were you kissing him in the garage yesterday?" Her face fell. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Kyle muttered something about leaving, but I held up my hand.
"No, Kyle.
"You stay. I think we all need to have a little chat." Rachel turned on me, her tone shifting to angry and defensive. "Okay, fine. You want the truth, Josh? I was bored, all right? You're always working, always tired. And Kyle, he was just nice to me. He made me feel special again. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So what? You destroy our marriage because some kid who delivers sandwiches made you feel special?" Kyle finally found his voice. "Hey, man. I didn't know she was married at first," he blurted out. I turned to him, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, so you didn't notice the wedding ring? Or the pictures of me all over the house?" Rachel started crying, but they weren't tears of guilt. They were the manipulative kind she always used when she wanted me to back off.
I'm sorry. Okay.
It was stupid. It didn't mean anything. I stared at her for a long moment before finally saying, "You're right. It didn't mean anything. Neither do you." With that, I walked out of the house. But I wasn't done. If she thought she could humiliate me like this and get away with it, she was dead wrong. After I left the house that night, I drove aimlessly for hours trying to calm down. The anger was like a fire burning in my chest. But beneath it, there was something else, humiliation. My wife had cheated on me with a food delivery guy. A guy who probably spent more time memorizing promo codes than actual conversation. And then it hit me. I wasn't just going to walk away and let Rachel and Kyle get off easy. If they wanted to play dirty, I could too. I just needed a plan. The idea came to me a couple of days later when I was scrolling through old photos on my phone. I stumbled across a picture of my dad's second wife, Lisa. She's 40, blonde, and honestly, she's always had a flirtatious vibe. At family gatherings, Lisa would laugh a little too hard at my jokes and make comments about how I must have broken a lot of hearts. It was harmless. Until now. Lisa and my dad had a rocky marriage. They were still together, but only barely. I knew from family gossip that Lisa was frustrated and bored, and, well, I figured she might be open to a little revenge collaboration. I reached out to her under the guise of needing advice about my marriage. We met up for coffee, and after some light conversation, I laid my cards on the table. I told her everything. Rachel's affair, Kyle, and how I wanted to hit back where it would hurt most. To my surprise, Lisa didn't hesitate. "You want me to help you make Rachel and Kyle squirm?" she asked, leaning in with a wicked grin. "I'm in." We came up with a plan right there in the coffee shop. Lisa and I would stage an affair, one that was just real enough to send a message. We'd take a few compromising photos and videos, nothing explicit but enough to make it clear that something had happened. and then I'd let Rachel and Kyle see what it felt like to be on the receiving end of betrayal. The next weekend, I invited Lisa over to my place while Rachel was out running errands. We had a couple of drinks, laughed about the absurdity of the situation, and took a series of suggestive photos. Me shirtless, Lisa sitting on my lap, her hand on my chest. At one point, she even leaned in close and whispered, "You know, if you ever want to make this real, just say the word." I laughed it off, but the truth was, it felt oddly empowering. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control. When we were done, I sent the photos to Rachel with a simple message. "Now we're even." The response was immediate. My phone blew up with angry texts and calls. Rachel accused me of being a hypocrite, a liar, and worse. But the cherry on top. When Kyle found out, he showed up at my house, demanding to know if it was true. "Why do you care?" I asked him with a smirk. "You're just the delivery guy." Kyle showed up at my door the next day, red-faced and fuming like he was about to throw hands. I wasn't intimidated. If anything, I was amused. This was the guy Rachel risked our marriage for? He jabbed a finger in my face the second I opened the door. "What the hell, man? You're messing with my life now." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and gave him the most nonchalant shrug I could muster. "Messing with your life? Oh, that's rich. You're the one who thought it'd be a good idea to hook up with a married woman. How's that working out for you?" Kyle stammered, trying to come up with some kind of defense. What you did with Lisa, that's messed up, dude." I smirked. "Why? Feels different when the shoe's on the other foot, doesn't it?" Before he could respond, Rachel came storming up the driveway. She must have been following him because she looked equally furious, but also panicked. "Josh, what the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed. I laughed bitterly. "What's wrong with me? Are you seriously asking me that right now, Rachel? You're the one who turned our marriage into a goddamn soap opera." She glared at me, her arms flailing in frustration. "You're being petty and immature. What you did with Lisa, it's disgusting." "Oh, I'm disgusting?" I said, stepping closer to her. "You're the one sneaking around with the delivery guy in my house. Don't you dare try to take the moral high ground here." Kyle tried to chime in, but I held up a hand to stop him. You don't even get to speak. You deliver fried chicken for a living, Kyle. You're not exactly in a position to lecture anyone about morals." Rachel's face turned red, and I could tell she was about to lose it. "You know what, Josh? You're pathetic. This whole revenge thing, it just shows how childish you are." I grinned, but there was no humor in it. "Childish? Maybe. But you're still standing here, losing your mind over it, so I'd say it worked." And then, for the grand finale, I pulled out my phone. I opened the photo gallery and held it up for both of them to see. Pictures of Lisa and me, looking very cozy. Rachel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Kyle just stared, his mouth hanging open like an idiot. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is what it feels like to be betrayed. You don't like it, do you? Funny how that works." Rachel started to cry. Not the manipulative tears this time, but real ones. "Josh, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I screwed up. Please, can we just talk about this?" I shook my head, my voice cold. "There's nothing left to talk about, Rachel. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I turned to Kyle. "And you can have her. Good luck. You're going to need it." With that, I walked back inside and slammed the door, leaving them both standing on the porch, stunned and speechless. After that showdown on my porch, I thought I'd finally feel some sense of closure. But what came next was a chain reaction of events that made me realize just how far Rachel and Kyle's mess would unravel. For starters, Rachel blew up my phone that night. I ignored the first few calls, but then she started sending long-winded texts about how sorry she was, how she'd made a huge mistake, and how she wanted to fix things. One text even read, "Kyle doesn't mean anything to me. You're the one I love, Josh. Please, just give me a chance to make this right." It was almost laughable. A week ago, she was defending her affair, and now she was throwing Kyle under the bus like he was just some random fling. Speaking of Kyle, Word must have spread about the drama because, according to one of Rachel's so-called friends, his boss found out about his little extracurricular activities. Apparently, the food delivery company wasn't thrilled about him using company time to connect with customers. He got fired. And Rachel? Her humiliation didn't stop there. The photos I sent her must have made the rounds because suddenly, everyone in our small social circle seemed to know about her affair and about my revenge. Friends who once fawned over Rachel started ghosting her. Even her yoga clients dropped off. One of her closest friends, Emily, called me a few days later and said, "I just don't know who Rachel is anymore. She lied to all of us. And honestly, what you did with Lisa, well, it's hard to feel bad for her." It wasn't long before Rachel's facade of control crumbled completely. She showed up at my house one afternoon, mascara streaked down her cheeks and looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. "Josh," she said, her voice breaking, "please, I can't do this without you. I lost my clients, Kyle's out of my life, and I've ruined everything. I need you." For the first time in years, I didn't feel any sympathy for her. "You don't need me, Rachel," I said flatly. "You need to deal with the consequences of your actions. You made your bed. Now lie in it." Her face crumpled, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her tears pull me back into her web of lies. After she left, I felt an unexpected wave of relief. For so long, I'd let Rachel manipulate and control me with her moods and excuses. But now, for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. With Rachel officially out of my life, I started focusing on picking up the pieces. Divorce papers were filed, and I made sure the settlement reflected Rachel's betrayal. She didn't fight me much. She probably knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. But moving on wasn't just about legal stuff. It was about rebuilding myself piece by piece. I threw myself into work, started hitting the gym again, and spent more time with my friends, who were more than happy to remind me of all the reasons why I deserved better. My relationship with Max, my golden retriever, became my rock. That dog could sense every mood I was in, and honestly, he probably kept me sane during some of the darker days. And then there was Lisa. I hadn't thought much about her after we staged our little revenge. It had felt like a one-and-done kind of thing, just two people who teamed up for a mutual goal. But then, out of nowhere, she texted me, "Hey, how's life post-drama? If you're up for it, I owe you a drink for that coffee shop scheme." Figured, why not? I wasn't looking for anything serious, and Lisa had been fun to be around during all the chaos. We met up for drinks at a small bar downtown, and what started as a casual catch-up turned into a full-blown conversation about life, relationships, and everything in between. Lisa opened up about how miserable her marriage to my dad had been, how he ignored her, dismissed her feelings, and treated her more like a trophy than a partner. I'll admit, I hadn't expected to feel sympathy for Lisa, but as she talked, I realized we had more in common than I thought. We'd both been stuck in toxic relationships, both been cheated on in different ways, and both had to claw our way back to some sense of self-respect. By the end of the night, we were laughing and joking like old friends. But then she leaned in, just slightly, and said, "You know, that thing we did to Rachel and Kyle, it wasn't just for revenge. I think it woke me up to what I've been missing." There was something in her tone, a mix of vulnerability and confidence, that caught me off guard. For a split second, I thought about what it would mean to cross that line with Lisa. But then I reminded myself of all the baggage involved. My dad, my family, the potential fallout. Still, I couldn't deny the chemistry between us. We didn't do anything that night, but we stayed in touch. And over time, what started as a revenge partnership slowly began to feel like something more. After that night at the bar, Lisa and I stayed in touch more than I expected. Started with casual texts, updates on life, random memes, but it didn't take long for things to heat up. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't drawn to her. She was smart, funny, and had this sharp edge that made every conversation feel alive. It wasn't just the chemistry, though. There was something comforting about talking to someone who'd seen me at my lowest and didn't judge me for it. Lisa understood me in a way Rachel never had. A couple of weeks later, we met up again, this time for dinner. It wasn't even supposed to be a date, but the energy between us was undeniable. Halfway through the night, she put her hand on mine across the table and said, "You know, Josh, I think we're both trying to pretend this is just friendly. But it's not, is it?" I didn't have an answer for her then. But later that night, after a few glasses of wine and a lot of lingering looks, we crossed the line. I won't go into details, but let's just say it was electric. For the first time in months, I felt wanted, not as a backup plan, not as someone to manipulate, but for who I was. Of course, the glow didn't last long, because Lisa was still married to my dad. We both knew we were playing with fire, but we kept seeing each other in secret. It wasn't just physical. Lisa and I started to connect on a deeper level. We talked about our plans for the future, our regrets, and what we wanted out of life. But secrets don't stay secret forever. One night, my dad came over unannounced to drop off some old tools he thought I'd want. Lisa was at my house, and while we'd been careful before, this time we slipped up. She'd parked her car in my driveway. When my dad saw her car, his face immediately twisted in confusion. "Is that Lisa's car?" he asked, staring at me like I just slapped him. I froze. Yeah, she's inside." He pushed past me and stormed into the house. Lisa was in the kitchen, and the second she saw him, she paled. "Rick," she said, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? What the hell are you doing here?" He shot back, his voice shaking with anger. I tried to intervene, but the damage was done. My dad pieced everything together in an instant. The shouting started, accusations flew, and within minutes, he was storming out of the house, yelling something about how I was dead to him. Lisa was in tears. I didn't know what to say or do, so I just held her while she cried. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that everything was about to explode. After my dad stormed out, I knew the fallout was going to be ugly, but I underestimated just how bad it would get. The next morning, I woke up to a string of angry texts and missed calls. Not just from my dad, but from my siblings and even a couple of extended family members. The texts from my dad were brutal. "You're a disgrace, Josh. How could you betray your own family like this? Lisa's filing for divorce, and it's on you. You're no son of mine." The rest of my family wasn't much better. My sister, Jen, called me to yell about how selfish I was. "You couldn't just move on like a normal person, huh? You had to blow up Dad's marriage and make it all about you." I tried to explain myself, to tell them about Rachel's betrayal, how Lisa and I had connected during that mess, how none of this had been planned. But no one wanted to hear it. In their eyes, I was the villain. And then there was Lisa. She called me later that day, her voice thick with emotion. "Rick wants a divorce," she said quietly. I tried to talk to him, but he's not even willing to listen. He's convinced this is all my fault and yours. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt guilty for the way things had spiraled, but another part of me was relieved. Lisa and Rick's marriage had been falling apart long before I came into the picture. If anything, we'd just sped up the inevitable. But the real bombshell came a week later, when my dad decided to go nuclear. He started telling everyone in our family, and even some mutual friends, that I had stolen his wife. He painted me as some scheming homewrecker who'd been plotting this all along. It got so bad that I started avoiding family gatherings altogether. Thanksgiving? Skipped it. Christmas? Forget it. I couldn't deal with the stares, the whispers, the judgment. Lisa and I kept seeing each other, but the stress was starting to take its toll. She felt torn between me and the life she'd built with my dad, even if that life had been crumbling for years. And I couldn't help but wonder if being together was worth all the chaos we'd caused. One night, over dinner, Lisa broke down. "I don't regret being with you, Josh," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I feel like I've lost everything. My marriage, my friends, even my reputation. I don't know if I can keep doing this." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I cared about Lisa, but I couldn't ignore the fact that our relationship had left a trail of destruction in its wake. After Lisa's breakdown at dinner, I realized we were at a crossroads. The chaos we'd unleashed on my family, on her life, on ourselves was unsustainable. As much as we cared about each other, it was clear that our relationship had become more about revenge, pain, and the fallout than any real future. We spent days avoiding the elephant in the room, both of us pretending we could just ride it out. But deep down, I knew it wasn't working. I could see it in Lisa's eyes every time she talked about the divorce proceedings with my dad, or how her friends had stopped calling her back. And I could feel it in my own gut every time I thought about the rift with my family and how I'd become the outcast. One night, after another long, uncomfortable silence, Lisa finally said what we'd both been too scared to say. "Josh," she began softly, her voice trembling, "I think we need to stop this. I think we're only hurting each other now." I nodded, my throat tightening. "I know," I admitted. "But that doesn't mean I don't care about you." "I care about you too," she said, tears spilling over. "But I've lost so much already, and I feel like I'm losing myself. I don't think I can keep doing this." We sat there for what felt like hours, holding hands across the table, neither of us ready to let go but knowing we had to. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about everything we'd destroyed to be together. The next day, Lisa moved out of town. She wanted a fresh start, somewhere far away from the whispers and the judgment. We promised to stay in touch, but deep down, we both knew that goodbye was final. As for me, I started focusing on rebuilding what was left of my life. I made small steps toward mending things with my family, though my relationship with my dad is probably beyond repair. The rest of the family is slowly starting to come around, but it's going to take time. Rachel, she tried reaching out a few times, but I shut that door for good. We finalized the divorce, and as far as I know, she's living on her own now. Kyle is out of the picture entirely, not that I'm surprised. Looking back, I've learned some hard truths about myself, about love, and about what happens when betrayal and revenge take over your life. Here's what I'd tell anyone reading this. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it doesn't fix the pain. Hurting Rachel and Kyle didn't erase what they did to me. It only dragged me into a darker place. You can't build happiness on the ashes of someone else's life. What Lisa and I had wasn't real. It was born out of mutual pain and anger. That kind of connection isn't sustainable. Sometimes you have to let go of the past, of people, of anger. Holding on to it only keeps you stuck. I'm not the same person I was when this all started, and honestly, that's probably a good thing. Life moves on, and so will I. If you're going through something like this, just remember, it gets better, but only if you're willing to let go of the things holding you back.